Goethe and the German poet Friedrich Schiller were notable proponents of the Sturm und Drang movement early in their life, although they ended their period of association with it by initiating what would become Weimar Classicism, a cultural and literary movement based in Weimar that sought to establish a new humanism by synthesizing Romantic, Classical, and Enlightenment ideas. What was to become known as Weimar Classicism was established by Illuminati member Karl August, Duke of Saxe-Weimar-Eisenach, of the Albertine House of Wettin, and a close friend of Frederick William III. The Schlegel brothers were leaders of the first phase of Romanticism in German literature, from about 1798 to 1804, and were represented by the work of a group centered in Jena, which around 1790 became the largest and most famous among the German states, with Johann Fichte, Friedrich Schelling, Novalis, and Schlegel, who were all active Masons, on the teaching staff. The University of Jena became the center of the emergence of German idealism and early Romanticism. Fichte was accused of being a member of the Illuminati, and while the claim cannot be substantiated, a good many of his friends were indeed members of the order, and he was also active as a Mason in the 1790s. Fichte became a Mason in Zurich in 1793 and wrote 2 lectures on the philosophy of Masonry. The first mention of Jacob Bohm in the Jena circle was in a letter by Friedrich Schlegel to Novalis, where he discusses the project of creating a new religion and mentions some of its forerunners, stating, "Tieck studies Jacob Bohm with great love," which was in reference to Johann Ludwig Tieck. In 1798, Ludwig Tieck got married and in the following year settled in Jena, which around 1790 became the largest and most famous among the German states, where he became the leader of the early Romantic school, also known as Jena Romanticism. The founding publication of German Romanticism was the Athenaeum, a literary magazine established in 1798 by the Schlegel brothers, featuring the work of Moses Mendelssohn's daughter Dorothea Schlegel and August Schlegel's wife Caroline Schelling and many others. Caroline and August Schlegel married in 1796, and she moved to Jena, where August had received a professorship. Their house became a meeting place for the young literary and intellectual elite, later associated with the German Romanticism. His brother Friedrich Schlegel and Friedrich's wife Dorothea Veit moved in. They were at the center of Jena Romanticism. Schelling was involved in the literary projects of her husband and his brother Friedrich. The use of the word Romanticism was invented by Schlegel, but spread more widely across France through its persistent use by Madame Germaine de Stael, a Franco-Swiss woman of letters and political theorist from Geneva. De Stael witnessed firsthand the French Revolution and the Napoleonic era up to the French Restoration, following the first fall of Napoleon in 1814 and his final defeat in the 100 Days in 1815. She was present at the Estates General of 1789 and at the 1789 Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Madame de Stael held a salon in the Swedish embassy in Paris, where she gave coalition dinners, which were frequented by Thomas Jefferson and Marquise de Condorcet. In 1796, she published On the Influence of the Passions, in which she praised suicide, which was a book that attracted the attention of Schiller and Goethe. When Napoleon was elected first consul for life in 1802, de Stael compared him to Machiavelli. Napoleon is said to have said, "I have 4 enemies: Prussia, Russia, England, and Madame de Stael." In 1803, Napoleon finally decided to exile de Stael without trial. Madame de Stael's intellectual collaboration with Benjamin Constant between 1795 and 1811 made them one of the most celebrated intellectual couples of their time. Constant was a Swiss-French political activist and writer on political theory and religion. His mentor was Jacob Marvillon, a member of the Illuminati and a close friend of the Comte de Mirabeau. While at the Protestant University of Erlangen in 1783, Constant gained access to the court of Duchess Sophie Caroline Marie of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel, the niece of Ferdinand of Brunswick, illuminatus and member of the Asiatic Brethren. She acted as a maternal mentor to him until his appointment to the court of her brother Charles William Ferdinand, Duke of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel, that required him to move north. De Stael, disappointed by the French nationalism, became interested in German Romanticism. She and Constance set out for Prussia and Saxony, and travelled with her 2 children to Weimar. Duchess Anna Amalia of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel welcomed them the day after their arrival. In Weimar, de Stael and Constant met Schiller and Goethe, and in Berlin they met the brothers August and Friedrich von Schlegel. At the Koppitz Castle in Switzerland, de Stael became the center of the Koppitz group, which had a considerable influence on the development of 19th century liberalism and romanticism. There was a stream of international visitors of influence. Stendhal referred to the Koppitz guest as the Estates General of European opinion. Madame de Stael found mysticism, in quote, so attractive to the heart, saying that that it, in quotes, united what was best in Catholicism and Protestantism, and that it was the form of religion that best suited and served a liberal political system. She hosted noted mystics such as Madame de Krüdener and Zacharias Werner. Madame de Krüdener was a Baltic German religious mystic who exerted influence on the Moravian Church and Tsar Alexander I of Russia. Werner was a German poet, dramatist, preacher, and a Freemason. Several of his dramatic poems were designed to evangelize Freemasonry, including The Templars in Cyprus and The Brethren of the Cross, a dramatic poem. Madame de Stael also read Saint Martin, who she later described as a man with a superior mind, who wrote books containing glimmers of the sublime. A much-quoted letter one friend commented to another about this circle, saying, "These people will all be turning Catholic, Bohemians, Martinist, mystics, all thanks to Schlegel. And on top of all of that, everything is turning German." Tieck, Novalis, and Friedrich Schlegel were attracted to Saint Martin, who had done the French translation of the works of Jacob Boehme. Another leading protege of Hamann was Illuminati member Friedrich Heinrich Jacobi, who was involved in the pantheism dispute against Lessing and Moses Mendelssohn. Jacobi was converted to Hamann's anti-Enlightenment philosophy and became his most energetic advocate. It was Jacobi who transmitted Hamann's thought to the Romantics. Hamann was, moreover, a mentor to Herder and an admired influence on Goethe, Jacobi, Hegel, Kierkegaard, Lessing, and Mendelssohn. Friedrich Wilhelm Joseph Schelling also admired Hamann. Like his mentor Fichte, Schelling was also associated with the Illuminati and was interested in Bohm, Swedenborg, and Mesmer. Jacobi continued to engage in further philosophical arguments with Goethe, Herder, Fichte, and Schelling. The effective result of the controversy was that Jacobi inadvertently contributed to a revival of Spinozism and pantheism. Friedrich C. Beiser writes that Spinoza's reputation changed from a devil into a saint. Those who became disciples of Spinoza included Goethe, Novalis, Hölderlin, Herder, Schlegel, Hegel, Schleiermacher, and Schelling. Novalis called Spinoza the God-intoxicated man. According to Glenn Alexander Maggie, the significance of the pantheism dispute of the late 18th century cannot be overstated. Thanks to Jacobi's revelations, pantheism became, as Heinrich Heine would put it in the next century, the unofficial religion of Germany. The second phase of Romanticism, comprising the period from about 1805 to 1830s, was marked by the cultural nationalism and the new attention to national origins, as attested by a deepening interest in the culture of German Volk, meaning folk, which was tied to the emergence of theories of the Aryan race. The term Aryan was borrowed a little earlier by Anquetil du Peyron from Herodotus to designate the Persians and the Medes, from the Persian word Aryan, from which is derived the word Iranian. The term gained widespread usage due to Friedrich Schlegel, justified by connecting the root Ari with the German word Ehre, or honor. The Romantics considered that the racial superiority of the German people, or Volk, was embedded in its language, culture, and its folklore. Herder conceived of nature and history as a process of evolving organic development, endowed with meaning, and reaching its fulfillment in the spiritual world of man. In quotes, "Man is part and continuation of nature at the same time, man, blood, and soil. Man's thoughts and emotions are a manifestation of sorts of the vital force, which operates in nature throughout its chain of being, from inanimate substances up to abstract thought. However, it is not the individual who is evolving, but humanity, as part of the race, the tribe, and the nation. Every nation shapes its own ideals on the basis of its unique characteristics, and from its language evolve different forms of speech through which individuals who make up the nation express their unique spiritual cultural aspirations." Herder referenced the ancient history of the Jews as an early example of this process. Fichte brought German nationalism forward as a response to the French occupation of German territories in his addresses to the German nation, evoking a sense of German distinctiveness in language, tradition, and literature that composed a common identity. Only when each people, left to itself, develops and forms itself in accordance with its own peculiar quality, and only when in every people each individual develops himself in accordance with that common equality as well as in accordance with his own peculiar quality, then only does the manifestation of divinity appear in its true mirror as it ought to be. And only a man who either entirely lacks the notion of the rule of law and divine order, or else is an obdurate enemy thereto, could take upon himself to want to interfere with that law, which is the highest law in the spiritual world. Of the most influential promoters of this new nationalism was Jacob Grimm. Inspired by the writings of Herder, Jacob and his brother Wilhelm Grimm compiled the famous Grimm's Fairy Tales, a collection of folk tales thought to represent the occult lore of the German people, and which included Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, and Hansel and Gretel. In the history of the German language, Jacob Grimm claimed that all the people of Europe, and to begin with, those which were originally related and which gained supremacy at the cost of many wanderings and dangers, emigrated from Asia in the remote past. They were propelled from east to west by an irresistible instinct, the real cause of which is unknown to us. The vocation and courage of those peoples, which were originally related and destined to rise to such heights, is shown by the fact that European history was almost entirely made by them. Such ideas finally caught on in the rest of Europe. In his History of Rome, Jules Michelet, a French nationalist historian who was interested in the occult and wrote the classic Satanism and Magic, stated, "Follow the migrations of mankind from east to west, along the sun's course and along the track of the world's magnetic currents. Observe its long voyage from Asia to Europe, from India to France. At its starting point in India, the birthplace of races and religions, the womb of the world. The chief propagandist of the Aryan myth in France was Ernest Renan, philosopher, historian, scholar of religion, leader of the school of critical philosophy in France, and Freemason, who began training for the priesthood but eventually left the Catholic Church after reading Ghost Faust. According to Renan, we salute those sacred summits, where the great races which carried the further of humanity in their hearts contemplated infinity for the first time, and introduced two categories which changed the face of the world, morality and reason. When the Aryan race, after thousands of years of striving, shall have become masters of the planets which they inhabit, their first duty will be to explore that mysterious region. No place in the world has had a comparable role to that of the nameless mountain or valley where mankind first attained self-consciousness. Let us be proud of the old patriarchs who at the foot of Emmaus laid the foundations of what we are and of what we shall become." Though England was not found on the notion of a shared heritage with its colonial subjects in India, the Aryan myth was finally popularized largely through the efforts of German Orientalist and language scholar Max Müller, who was one of the most renowned scholars of the 19th century. Originally a student of Sanskrit, Müller eventually began studying the Zoroastrian Avesta, which led him to the study of comparative religion and to the editing of the most ancient of Hindu sacred hymns, the Rig Veda. His principal achievement, though, was the editing of the sacred books of the East, translations of major Oriental scriptures. He was appointed Deputy Professor of Modern Languages at Oxford in 1850 and Professor of Comparative Philology in 1868. He wrote, "The Aryan nations who pursued a northwesterly direction stand before us in history as the principal nations of northwestern Asia and Europe. They have been the prominent actors in the great drama of history and have carried to their fullest growth of all the elements of active life with which our nature is endowed. They have perfected society and morals, and we learn from their literature and works of the art of the elements of science, the laws of art, and the principles of philosophy. In continual struggle with each other and with the Semitic and Turanian races, these Aryan nations have become the rulers of history, and it seems to be their mission to link all parts of the world together by the chains of civilization, commerce, and religion." Combined with the theory of the Aryan race, the notion of inevitable progress led to development of the Eurocentric history of Western civilization, which celebrates Europeans as the vanguards of human intellectual progress. It was due to Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, a colleague of Friedrich Schlegel at the University of Jena, that Greece's debt to the ancient Near East was minimized, favoring its society as a miracle and as the so-called cradle of Western civilization. As demonstrated by Glenn Alexander Maggie in Hegel and the Hermetic Tradition, Hegel's philosophy was derived from Lyria's Kabbalah, mediated through the thoughts of Jacob Boehme, positing that history was the unfolding and progression of spirit. According to Hegel, world history is the record of the spirit's effort to attain knowledge of what is in itself. The Orientals do not know that the spirits are man such are free in themselves, and because they do not know that, they are not themselves free. They only know that one is free. The consciousness of freedom first awoke among the Greeks, and they were accordingly free. But like the Romans, they only knew that some and not all men as such are free. The Germanic nations, with the rise of Christianity, were the first to realize that all men are by nature free, and that freedom of spirit is his very essence. As pointed out by Ernst Benz in Mystical Sources of German Romantic Philosophy, the chief conduit of the ideas of Boehme to Hegel and the other German idealists of the time was Saint Martin. Hegel is regarded as the leading exponent of German idealism and said, "The fact is that Spinoza is made a testing point in modern philosophy, so that it may be really said, you are either a Spinozist or not a philosopher at all." While it is not proven that Hegel was a member of the Illuminati, as demonstrated by Glenn Alexander Maggie in Hegel and the Hermetic Tradition, Hegel did often refer cryptically to Illuminati and Masonic symbols. He was an avid reader of the quasi-Masonic journal Minerva, which disseminated the thought of the radical Jacobins. Hegel famously wrote, referring to the Illuminati symbol, that the owl of Minerva takes its flight only when the shades of night are gathering. In Bern, Switzerland, Hegel became part of a family circle, which according to H.S. Harris, like all of Hegel's subsequent connections in Frankfurt, as far as these can be traced, has strong overtones of Freemasonry. John Burbridge noted that whenever the young tutor arrived in a strange town, he soon established contact with people known to be active in the most progressive strands of the Masonic order. According to Gerald Hanratty, during his youth, Hegel eagerly assimilated Masonic ideas and aspirations which were propagated in Germany by supporters of the French Revolution. Throughout his life, he interested himself in the Masonic movement movement, so that its ideas and aspirations were important elements of the matrix from which Hegel's Gnostic system emerged. Ernst Benz wrote that, in a certain sense, one can refer to the philosophy of German idealism as Bohm Renaissance, when Bohm was discovered at the same time by Schelling, Hegel, Franz von Baader, Tieck, Novalis, and many others. There are references throughout Hegel's writings to many of the leading figures of the Hermetic tradition, including Meister Eckhart, Giordano Bruno, Paracelsus, and Bohm. In lectures on the history of philosophy, Hegel couples Bohm and Francis Bacon as the twin representatives of, in quotes, modern philosophy in its first statement. Hegel said of Bohm, through him, philosophy first appeared in Germany. In a letter to Schelling, Hegel writes, "Reason and freedom remain our watchword, and our rallying point, the invisible church," a term used by the German mystics and the Freemasons. Harris notes, it seems to be virtually certain that for Hegel, at any rate, the invisible church originally referred to the cosmopolitan idea of Freemasonry, as envisaged by Lessing in Ernst and Volk. Lessing's Nathan the Wise was a great influence on him. Lessing's play emphasizes the Masonic theme of a unity of world's religions, and therefore of an invisible church. In another letter to Schelling, Hegel refers to Fichte's conception of God as absolute ego, as part of the esoteric philosophy, and according to Maggie, there is a very strong similarity between Fichte's ideas of a dialectic absolute ego and the dialectic in Bohm's doctrine. So that ends our series for the Aryan race. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and click the notification button so that you don't miss another video. Also make sure to check out the website linked in the description below for all the sources, and until next time, stay safe and stay knowing.